Today's Locked On Pelicans dives into the latest NBA draft buzz, crucial combine insights, and pivotal free agency moves shaping the Pelicans' future. It's a Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Friday, final show of the week. It has been an eventful week. At that, with the lottery results, Pelicans picking 7th. The combine is in full swing, so here's what we're going to do in today's show. We're going to dive into the latest draft updates and rumors around San Antonio, Dallas, Giannis, Dylan Harper, all of these things here. We're going to then get into winners and losers from the NBA Combine just in terms of measurements. Guys that maybe are going to fall a little bit or rise on up and how that's going to impact the Pelicans draft. And then we get some free agency updates as well that I want to dive into. So a lot to cover in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prizepicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everyday. And that means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. So let's get right into some of the latest news and rumors and things that are kind of going on around the league. And it's all kind of centering primarily around the draft right now. So let's get the easy one out of the way. From everyone I've talked to and read online, the Dallas Mavericks are taking Cooper Flagg #1 overall. Probably aren't even interested in trading him for Giannis or anything like that. Not that this impacts the Pelicans much, but the Giannis news is rather impactful, I think, right? Them taking Cooper Flagg is the obvious thing, as annoying as that team getting the lottery win is. So you have a team that's going to not be in the Giannis running. That impacts the other teams, right? That impacts a team like San Antonio, Houston, anyone else that's interested in trading for Giannis, because all of a sudden, if you take one suitor out of the running, their offers don't need to be as good. You're competing against one less team, one fewer team, whatever it is. That's going to impact San Antonio in particular, because they are kind of probably the pole sitter for Giannis is what I would assume. That's kind of what everyone seems to think here. You know, when it comes to them, they have a ton of assets they can trade. They can trade the 2nd overall pick. You could get the Pelicans almost certainly need to be involved in any Giannis trade just to send some of those assets back to Milwaukee. But San Antonio maybe doesn't need to worry about giving as much stuff up as they once were. They're still going to need to give a ton up for Giannis. But overall, this changes the calculus of that a little bit here. And now you're hearing rumors from San Antonio, and their general manager went out and said this. I can't remember who it was to, so I don't have the credit for it, but said, yeah, we're taking Dylan Harper essentially. When they were looking at that, and you know, we talked about trading up for Dylan Harper from 7 to 2, trying to get him. You know, and I think one of the realistic things for the San Antonio Spurs that they need to pay attention to is their salary cap in future years. And that's a very realistic thing if they trade for Giannis, knowing that you're going to pay 30% of the cap to Wemby, 30% to De'Aaron Fox, and then, you know, potentially 30% to someone else. You need to manage your books pretty well here. And they're in a good position to be able to do that, you know, before those type of trades. But now it seems like they're kind of sending signals out of, yeah, we're not going to trade for Giannis. We're just going to draft Dylan Harper. You know, they specifically said they are in talent acquisition mode still, acquiring talent. It's a smart move on their part. We've seen a number of teams, Pelicans included, right, try and jumpstart rebuilds by making a go-all-in move a little bit too early, and then it doesn't work out, and then your books are kind of messed up, and you just never kind of get out of that, and it leads to an era not really taking off. And I mean that for the Zion Williamson era, the Anthony Davis era too. So those are factors in here. Now, San Antonio saying they're going to take Dylan Harper. They don't care that they've got a glut of guards that, you know, not everyone fits together. And how are you going to do that? Is Dylan Harper kind of get buried on the bench, something like that? they can trade other people. They can figure these sorts of things out, right? If they knew they were going to land number 2 overall, I doubt they trade for De'Aaron Fox, even though they really didn't give up that much to get him. But it just likely means that if you do want to, that's going to cost you more than you realized in the first place. But this also could be a negotiating through the media tactic. Well, we like Dylan Harper. We're not going to trade the 2nd overall pick. So if the Bucks call about Giannis, like, we're not going to give you as much because we really value this 2nd overall pick kind of thing. We saw this a couple of years ago with the Pelicans looking into trying to get Scoot Henderson. Then once you kind of telegraph that, the price goes up with that sort of thing. So that's a little bit interesting to kind of keep in mind, with the latest rumors being, San Antonio was going to take Dylan Harper regardless of the lack of fit or the glut of guards that they have on that team. Couple other big kind of news and rumors out of the combine before we get to measurements in the next segment here. And that is some reporting of meetings already taking place. And this makes sense. The team has a ton of people there at the combine right now. Will Guillory, per Jeremiah Fears says he's already had a meeting with the Pelicans in Chicago during the NBA combine. They're still going to need a guard in the future, even if you will get DeJounte Murray back this season, and he can still be a very impactful player for the team. So Jeremiah Fears saying he's met with the Pelicans is not a big surprise. You're going to kick tires, do your due diligence on all of these prospects. We'll get to Fears a little bit in a minute with some of the measurements here. Fears, per Will Guillory, listed New Orleans, Philadelphia, Dallas, San Antonio, and Sacramento as the teams he's met with so far. Sacramento doesn't have a first-round pick, so that one's kind of funny. Maybe a trade partner with the New Orleans Pelicans, who knows? Will Guillory also mentioned Con Knippel. Knippel said he's met with Chicago, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Atlanta, and Orlando. So those are teams that are, in the Pelicans range too. And Knippel is a guy that I think fits on this team really well next to Zion Williamson, will be an impactful player at the NBA level. It's worth noting that as of the reporting on the 14th, Knippel had not met with New Orleans. That might change too. So don't read too much into these like early reports, and a lot won't come out until later. And more importantly than just some of the quick meetings that you have at the NBA Combine is the in-person workouts that you're going to do, where the team flies you to New Orleans, works them out at the facility, and puts them through some stuff. Those are actually vitally important and arguably the most important part of the pre-draft process here, more so even than the measurements, which we're going to get into in a second. Those pre-draft workouts, I've told this story on Locked On Pelicans before we were on YouTube. So this tells you like how long ago it was and how long I've been doing this show, is that, the reason they took Buddy Hield over Jamal Murray in that draft was Murray had a disastrous workout with New Orleans, where he couldn't defend even one of the Pelicans' assistant coaches at the time. Not good. That caused them to take Buddy Hield. They thought his defense would be better than Murray's. Murray's probably ended up being the better NBA player, though Buddy Hield's had a nice career, but that's how important those pre-draft workouts can be. Those are more important than anything else that you're going to hear. We'll be tracking those here on Locked On Pelicans. So coming up, winners and losers when it comes to measurements from the combine and what it could mean for New Orleans. Let's break down how tall players are and all that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Prizepicks. Basketball season's at its peak, and with the playoffs heating up, it's time to put your sports knowledge to work with Prizepicks, the top platform for daily fantasy sports. Prizepicks makes it easy. You pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and you're in. Whether it's points, rebounds, assists, you've got a shot to win up to 2,000 times your entry. If you want Jaylen Brown for more than 8 rebounds, there you go. If you want someone like Jalen Brunson, let's keep going with the Jalen's here, for more than 28 points, you can take it. The app takes less than 60 seconds to use, and I love how you can mix and match basketball players and other sports like baseball, even esports, in the same lineup. And when you hit your picks, your payout hits fast, sometimes in as little as 15 minutes. So download the app, use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. And thank you. There we go. Thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well, and become an everyday or listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. For your second listen today, I got an easy one for you. Locked On NBA Game Night, because I'm on there today. Every game, every night until an NBA champion is crowned. There's only one game. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NBA Game Night on Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Here, we're going to be breaking down Game 6 between the Thunder and the Denver Nuggets. I'm looking forward to the show. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make that your second listen today. So let's keep talking about the NBA Combine and updates and news that you need to know from here. And one thing that's coming out right now is all the measurements. And there's some winners and losers just based on how tall these guys are, how long their wingspans are, how, if they look athletic, if they pass some of the tests there, do well. There's some very clear winners and losers. So let's get into a few of these here that I think are really worth noting. So let's start with Khaman Maluach from Duke, the center. 7 foot 3/4 inch without shoes, barefoot. A 7, 6 3/4 wingspan, and his standing reach is 9'6". Those are exceptional numbers. The Pelicans want to add some length, some size. He's the dude. He looks and moves pretty well too. Watching him kind of go through some of the drills that I saw, I liked what we saw from him. I think he's very much in the running for the Pelicans at 7 overall as just a massive, massive dude. The other guy that really jumped out at me, and I'm not sure how I feel about him yet as a prospect, but I think I'm going to really start to like him, is Trey Johnson, the guard, two guard really, out of Texas. 6'4" 3/4. That's a really good size barefoot. A 6'10" 1/4 wingspan and an 8.5 foot standing reach. Those are really good numbers for a two guard there. When you watched him move, you see the hyper athleticism from him, and that dude just made everything in the shooting drills that they did at the Combine. His stock, along with Maluach's, is certainly gonna go up, I think, as this pre-draft process happens, to the point where they could be just top 5 picks. I think Trey Johnson might have solidified like a top 5 pick and be just out of the reach of New Orleans at 7 overall. A guy that also really kind of stood out just in terms of size is Igor Demon out of BYU, the point guard, at 6'8" 1/4, which is very good. 6'10" 1/4 wingspan and an 8 foot 9.5 inch standing reach. The athleticism isn't really there. I'm not particularly high on how he played, and I don't really care that he's just like a big dude. At point guard, though, you want size at that position, but it's worth noting that, that was pretty good too. Another guy that I think really jumped out at me on Combine numbers is Colin Murray-Broyles. I really like him out of South Carolina. I think he's going to be a polarizing prospect in this class. The defense is really, really elite as a help defender and on-ball defender. He plays well above his listed size. And look, his numbers came in pretty good too. 6'6", a 7 foot wingspan, which is also like truly incredible here. So he was 6'6" 1/2, wingspan of 7 3/4, standing reach of 8 feet 10.5 inches. Those are better numbers than Draymond Green for the most part, who he has been really compared to. Him and Julius Randle are the two people, at least in terms of just the measurements. He's coming in really right kind of in that frame. And you don't want to just be like, this dude was this tall with this long of a wingspan and all that. That doesn't equate to anything necessarily, but you at least want to have those. And Colin Murray-Broyles definitely has those. I think he's the best defender in the class. He's a really good passer too. Now, no 3-point shot. I don't know if he's going to be able to shoot the 3. And you're seeing Draymond Green really hurted, past tense, the Golden State Warriors, not that they're out of the playoffs here, because he couldn't do anything offensively. You can't be a 0 offensively, even if your defense is elite at this point in time in the NBA. But the fact that he can play make and do other things, I think, does really show that he's going to be an impactful player. But how impactful, I'm not entirely sure. And so that's something that's, worth noting here. The comps are Draymond Green and Julius Randle. Those are really good, but I don't know if he's going to actually kind of reach those heights, let's say, when it comes to it. A couple of losers here that I think is going to make this draft a little bit more interesting. Derek Queen, the center from Maryland, came in at 6'9". That's undersized. When you look at the athleticism drills and things like that, he did not do well. He did not do well at all, truthfully. And I think that's something that was kind of eye-opening. He has a lot of the type of skills that you want at the NBA level. Shooting looks like it could be there. He had a 7-foot wingspan, a 9'1" standing reach. Those are just like, eh. And then when you look at some of the other athletic numbers, they're not great. Things like the shuttle run, the standing vertical, the max vert, the lane agility drill, none of those numbers were good. They were like mediocre average at best. So that's going to really, really hurt him, especially compared to guys like Maluach and others who did really well when it comes to some of the combine measurements. You could almost say Derek Queen kind of failed them here. There have been questions about his motor. And so is it, motor and you're a little bit slow, ain't going to get it done at the NBA level. I think you're going to see him start to fall in mock drafts from this sort of thing. Jeremiah Fears also, I wouldn't say, the measurables were great. 6'2.5" barefoot, 6'5" in the quarter wingspan, at 8'2.5" standing reach. They're not bad, but they're not great. He's a little bit undersized, and he looked like a twig out there too. He's going to need to put on a lot of weight. Still like his skill set. What he's done at his age is very, very impressive. But this is someone who is going to be very raw coming in and is going to take a lot of development time. I think you can see in that sense, like a comparison to Kyra Lewis Jr. And we see how, Kyra was never turning the corner here even before his injury in New Orleans. So I think that might be just too much of a project at 7 for me. Still like him, but he's kind of small. The other drills and, the agility drills, those things he did well in. So keep that in mind too. You can kind of make up from that, and he's a good player, but kind of small. In my opinion, other than Derek Queen, the biggest loser here from this draft was Ace Bailey. We've thought he was 6'10" is what Rutgers has listed him at. Not 6'10". Barefoot, he's 6'7.5", so 2.5 inches shorter. A 7-foot half-inch wingspan, that's good. An 8'11" standing reach, those are good, but he's shorter than you realize. Now, the standing reach and other things is rather important here, and that's beating a number of players, like right around his size. That's a taller, a longer standing reach than Cooper Flagg has, and Cooper Flagg's a little bit taller than him. The wingspan's pretty good too, but he's shorter than he seemed, right? If you told me he was 6'10" and doing all this stuff, like he looks entirely as a different prospect. The fact that Ace Bailey kind of came in undersized. The other measurements are good, and the agility drills and all of that were also really good. But there's bigger questions around him, and I think that size is going to probably hurt him a little bit too when it comes to this draft. I wouldn't be shocked if he falls. I don't think he's still going to be there at 7. Now, if he's there at 7, I do think New Orleans should just run to the podium and take him. Figure it out later, even if the fit with Zion is questionable at best. But I wonder if that could cause him to slide, and maybe someone like Trey Johnson moves up. You see Ace Bailey falling, some of these other players moving up too. That could cause a lot of intrigue, I think, in kind of the middle of the lottery, right around the 7th pick where the Pelicans are playing. We'll see how these interviews go, and as more starts to emerge, we're going to be tracking it all here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So coming up next, we got free agency news and updates. Let's break it all down. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Look, there's nothing like going to live events. The intensity there, if you're at a sporting event, just the energy, the crowd, if it's a comedy show or a concert, whatever it is, the atmosphere is just so much better with a live event. And if you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats or tickets for even the biggest events out there. And prices on the app actually go down the closer it is to the start of the event. With killer last minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. If you want to get tickets to a concert last minute, you're looking for something to do on a Friday, just open the Game Time app. you're going to see deals up to 60% off in great seats. And I love that you can see the exact view before you buy. There's no surprises there. It's also super simple. It's just 2 taps and you've got your tickets. And with the game time guarantee, you know you're getting the best deal. If you find a better price in the same section in row, they're going to credit you 110% of the difference. And look, the NFL schedule release just dropped. And you better believe I'm already looking at the calendar here to see which Saints games I'm going to go to. So Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You're going to find great seats for as low as $100, even less than that, thanks to exclusive discounts. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And now for your second listen, Locked On Saints. We just said it, the NFL schedule just dropped. What's the hardest part, the easiest part? Why are there no national TV games? It's kind of obvious. For the Saints, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints, making sense of everything black and gold, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. By the way, Ross was in there in the Saints schedule release video. It was great. That was a lot of fun. Trust me, you're going to know what I'm talking about here. I got a screen grab of it. It's going to be a meme. It's going to be a thing. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We'll use it at some point. All right, let's get into the latest free agency news for the New Orleans Pelicans. And this comes from Michael Scotto of Hoops Hype here. And, you know, when the Pelicans traded Brandon Ingram, bringing in Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown, first round pick, you know, those were guys that they kind of really touted that they want here long-term in New Orleans. You know, now Kelly Olynyk is under contract next year, so he's here. When you look at how well he played and the fact that he and Zion seem to do really well together, and it put a stretch 5 next to Zion really for the first time in his career, even if Kelly Olynyk it's a stretch to call him a stretch 5. That was terrible, wasn't it? I'm so sorry. It's a Friday. Come on. So, you know, you see that worked. It's kind of proof of concept in a sense. Not that we really needed it with Zion Williamson, knowing that would obviously be a good thing. So, he's under contract. Like he's here next year. He's going to maybe be included in a trade given that he's an expiring deal. That part is not surprising whatsoever when it comes to it. But Michael Scotto is saying now maybe like he's not part of the future. You know, that was under David Griffin. And now that Griffin is not here, things have changed. And this goes to what we kind of talked about, you know, on Locked On Blazers and even in yesterday's show with Scoot Henderson. Yesterday's show or 2 days ago with Scoot Henderson. You know, that was a David Griffin guy and someone they really wanted and would probably still want to try and go and get. But Joe Dumars might not feel the same way when it comes to it. So it's worth kind of keeping in mind here. You know, Bruce Brown at one point seemed like a lock, like the Pelicans were going to re-sign him, kind of a David Griffin guy. They want to bring him back. And because he was a piece in the Brandon Ingram trade. But now all of a sudden, it's not a lock that Bruce Brown returns. Now, truthfully, I don't see how it was ever really like a lock that Bruce Brown returned. He played terribly for New Orleans. Like he was not good. Some of the better fits on the team pregame and when he was injured sitting on the bench, if you know you're into the cowboy kind of look there, he definitely pulls that off really well. But this is someone who did not play particularly well in New Orleans last season, right? He shot 41%. He shot better than I actually thought. 35.6% from 3. That's not bad. 8.2 points per game, 4.2 rebounds, 2.4. His numbers are better than I kind of realized, I think. That's good at least. But, you know, given that he was making, you know, $20 million a year, whatever his contract was this season, $23 million a year, you know, he wasn't going to return on that kind of deal. He'd be looking at like a mid-level exception deal, $10 million, something along those lines, in my opinion, you know, kind of given that he hasn't reached some of the same heights since leaving Denver. But given the salary cap situation for New Orleans, and I haven't updated my cap sheet, and I probably really need to do that with the 7th overall pick, so maybe we'll talk about that on Monday. Maybe that's a good show for Monday. It's like the salary cap situation for New Orleans. That, and I got another topic for Monday too, around Zion Williamson. All right, I'm talking through things out loud. It's Friday. Give me a break. I'm ready for the weekend. So, given their salary cap situation, call them right around like $10 million to the luxury tax threshold, something like that right now. Re-signing him for big money never kind of seemed realistic. Are you going to put yourself in a situation where you need to deduct the tax or can't make a move you want to make because it would put you into the tax because of Bruce Brown Jr.? Like that doesn't make a lot of sense to me from a New Orleans Pelicans perspective. So I don't really think he was ever a lock to return. I think that was something that they were just saying. Maybe if they could get a good offer right at the trade deadline to reroute him coming from the Toronto Raptors in that deal. But just financially, Bruce Brown hasn't made a ton of sense for the New Orleans Pelicans. I don't know if he will. If you get him on like a super event minimum or something, like sure. But it feels like he'll go for more than that. He is still a useful player and a good veteran presence on kind of any team that you bring him to. And a couple of years ago, he was really in demand. He was really, really in demand, hasn't kind of lived up to that. So he's not going to be, I'd be shocked if he's getting $20 million annually next year, but you never know. But he never seemed like he was kind of a lock to come back to New Orleans, in my opinion, in the first place. But we'll see. We've still got a little bit of a ways to go before free agency, and what the Pelicans do in free agency or don't do in free agency will also be impacted by the NBA draft and how the combine goes and how these workouts go and all that. We're going to be covering it all here on the daily Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And that's going to do it for this episode, this week of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. I appreciate y'all so much for making Locked On Pelicans part of your week. If you're a new listener, thanks for being here. It's the type of coverage you're going to get all year long, Monday through Friday. We'll drop to 3 days a week, a little bit deeper in the offseason, give me a little bit of a break. But still got a lot to talk about, a lot of interesting things going on with the Pelicans. We'll have all the updates here. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join on YouTube as well. And I'll be back with y'all next time here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.